So population's a gigantic issue in Europe right now, and if we're not able to fix these problems, then there's going to be huge ramifications in the future. Let's look at the fertility rate of Europe, right? Remember that 2.1 is the normal replacement rate to replace your parents and any other things that there might be in that point 1. The fertility rate of Europe right now is 1.59, so without any outside sources, population is decreasing in Europe. If you remember the demographic transition model, they talk about a fourth stage where death rates and birth rates are both low and pretty equal. And some people describe Europe with that right now. Yet some people use a fifth stage to describe Europe, which means that death rates are actually overpowering birth rates. And this is leading to declining population, and I think this is a more accurate way of describing Europe right now, as you can see through the fertility rate that we just talked about. And so the effect of this decreasing fertility rate is that you have a smaller and younger workforce that needs to provide for a larger, older population. If you look at the median age of Europe, it's around 42 right now, so they're only about 13 years from retirement in most European countries, and people are living longer and longer. And so what's going to happen is that as people get older, they're going to near retirement more, and then there's going to be another 20 or 25-year period where the younger population, which is smaller now, is going to have to provide they're going to have to pay for everything that the older population needs in like social welfare and all these types of things. And so this is our first problem of debt crisis, right? Europe, even right now, spends around 33 to 50% of its total GDP on social welfare programs. And this number is only going to grow because of the increasing elderly population. And so what's going to happen is that if the younger population can't pay enough to cover these costs, then the governments are going to have to borrow even more, and this is just going to contribute to the debt problem that's happening right now with the euro falling and all that happening. And so this is going to affect other things like education, environmentalism, and even government stability, because governments are going to cut these programs, and then people are going to be mad because the government's not meeting the revolution of rising expectations. So what's the solution to this? And the answer is actually immigration. Immigration is the reason that countries like France, England, and the United Kingdom are actually growing in population right now. And so where are these people coming from? Well, some are coming from Eastern Europe following the collapse of the Cold War because they want to escape the perils of the Soviet economy still being left over. There's no consumer goods, there's nothing like that, and so they want better economic condition. And the same is for Southern Europe. There's these PIGS countries, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Spain, Greece, which have a huge debt crisis right now, and people want better economic conditions, so they're moving to Northern Europe. And finally, for the Middle East and Africa, there's war, debt, famine, all these problems, so people want to move to Europe for better conditions. Yet with all these immigrations, it's very similar to the U.S. People don't appreciate the Mexicans moving to the U.S. because of these job problems, right? There's increased competition, and this is the same in Europe. If you remember the Charlie Hebdo attacks that just happened recently, countries are looking to roll back immigration laws now because they don't want people going out and to like the Middle East and getting these radical ideas and then bringing them back to Europe and committing these acts of terror. And there's even groups like in Germany, Pegida, which are protesting against this immigration and this Islamization of Europe. So this Fortress Europe thing is a really big problem, and it's making immigration almost a centrifugal force. But it can act like a centripetal force as well. If we look to Turkey, Turkey would be a great addition to the EU if people would accept it. Turkey has a stable and young population. Its median age is 28.1. Its fertility rate is 2.09, and they could solve a lot of Europe's social welfare programs if we allowed them to come over and work. Yet the problem is the Fortress Europe mentality, because there's this thing called the Schengen Agreement, which the EU created to create this United States of Europe and integrate Europe more. What the Schengen Agreement does is it abolishes internal borders. So if you enter Europe, you can travel anywhere in Europe. And so what people are saying is that if Turkey joins the EU and accepts the Schengen Agreement, it's just going to make it easier for these Muslims and Turks to enter Europe, and then they're going to take more jobs, and nothing's going to improve. Even though we can see that the opposite's actually going to happen, and you're going to be able to solve your GDP issues and all that. So what you can see here is that these attempts to integrate Europe are actually leading to greater harms, and this is worrying for the EU because it's trying to create this United States of Europe, but nothing it's doing is actually working. So let's look through Russia too. Russia has many of the same problems as Europe regarding population, but its conditions actually even worse right now because you have this the ruble falling because of oil prices falling, and that's a really big issue for Russia right now because of the Soviet hangover. It had a lacking in weak economy after the Cold War because they only focused on industrial things. So if it's not able to keep up its oil supply, if it has a decreasing populations, it's just going to collapse because there's nothing to hold it up. There's no people, there's no economy, and so Russia's going to collapse if it can't fix their population issues and their economy issues. So what you can see here is that population is a gigantic issue, and it ties into every other revolution, right? Because you're going to cut spending on a lot of the other things, and by having less money because of a higher population, you're going to decrease government stability, and this is going to lead to increased conflict. So if the EU and Europe isn't able to solve these population issues, then the dream of a United States of Europe might ultimately collapse, and Europe itself might collapse. So population needs to be fixed.